Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of Simply Tech Live. How you guys doing?
Doing great, Derek. Doing
Awesome.
Is
great.
this our sixth or seventh session, Derek?
I think it's number 8 at this point. We're just
Are you
we're just churning and burning right now. It's like
okay? That's awesome.
yeah, it's like crazy. This is going to be a really fun session. If this is your first time watching live, Simply Tech Live is a live discussion, predominantly on LinkedIn Live. It's a beta application rollout that they're doing right now. We got some early access. So we're going to try to come on each week at this point just to discuss the evolving landscape of technology and how it's helping this global pandemic, this global crisis, and how each and every one of us are just deploying ourselves and our resources to try to get the best out of this thing. So what do you think, Ali? Maybe start off the discussion with one positive thing that's going on in our lives?
Yeah, why don't you start yourself?
Yeah, so this last Sunday, Easter Sunday, obviously couldn't get together with my family to have the Easter ham. My mom's side of the family is Brazilian. They're very, very Catholic, very religious, so we tend to get together on Easter. We couldn't do that, so we did a virtual session. I'm not going to say which technology we did the virtual session on. We got together. My grandfather, he passed away 2 years ago. And while we were all talking virtually, my grandma, my mom, and my brothers and my sisters, my aunts, I put a video up of my grandfather while he was still alive, laughing and telling a joke right behind me while I was telling a joke. And it just made the entire session like so much better. It was just an amazing thing. And technology made that possible. And this entire quarantine made that possible. So that's my positive thing for the week.
That's awesome. What about you, Ganesh?
Nothing. I'm just trying to stay positive. There are a lot of things going on, and at least things are stabilizing. People, things are getting better with the whole coronavirus situation, and hopefully, fingers crossed. We should things should start improving in another month or so. So just staying positive at the moment.
So, and I think this is a good segue to our topic. I mean, this is going to be a follow-up to a series of broadcasts that we've had in the past couple of weeks with your peers, with Mark, Nikita.
Right.
Last week, we had a session with my peer, Todd Kiddo, about analytics. And that's something that probably you can share a little bit more about, what your team has been doing and has been involved since this pandemic started a couple of months ago. But again, as an architect, we always want to make sure that when we help customers, it's not just about, turning on the switch and, deploy a solution to a cloud environment like Azure, but it's all about what is the long-term plan and how can we make sure that we think about things like high availability, resiliency, and things like that. And that's something that you've been working on even before this pandemic started. You were an MTC alumni, so we
Right.
chatted and worked on multiple solutions together in the past. So with that, maybe you start with a little intro about, who is Ganesh, what do you do, and we jump into the conversation.
Sure. Thanks, Ali. So,
All right.
Hold on 1 second, Ganesh. I'm not going to let Ali get away that clean.
Oh my God!
What's your positive thing, man?
All right, positive thing. It's not really that positive, but it's just kind of funny. So we found out that Kylo, our dog, has gained some weight. And what's happening right now is that he's on a strict diet. And this guy is on me 24/7, begging for food. And at some point, I'm going to send a picture that I shared on Twitter, and you just need to look at his eyes. And these pets are super smart, and they know how to manipulate you. So again, that was one thing that I dealt with.
Awesome.
Nice.
Take it, Ganesh. Go for it. Loved it.
Nice. Yeah. So, Ali and I go back a long way. So when I actually joined Microsoft a couple of years back, I joined the MTC team in the Seattle area, and I was part of the Seattle MTC, and we collaborated on quite a few projects. And then, I decided to join the healthcare team, the healthcare CSU, the customer success unit. And this was like a year and a half back. And our team's primary mission is to basically help customers succeed in deploying solutions on Azure. And that's what we've been focused on, helping our healthcare payers and providers. I primarily work with a set of payers and providers, provider accounts in the Northwest region. And a couple of months back, when the coronavirus hit all of us, we started working with one of the largest healthcare providers in the Northwest. That's about the time when our healthcare team came out with some pre-built templates for COVID-19 assessment and FAQ. So we got the job right away. We started working with our customer, and then we kind of help them deploy the COVID-19 healthcare Microsoft Healthcare bot within a matter of few days. So we were able to help them quickly deploy the solution so that people could go on to their website and self-assess themselves. But while we were in the process of deploying this solution, we realized that it was a single region deployment, and certain critical components of the solution were deployed in a single region. Mm-hmm. And we quickly realized that if there was an outage or something, if there was an outage in one of the Azure regions and the service went down, and that would be a big problem. So we kind of put together a SWAT team quickly to work on a high availability reference architecture for Microsoft Healthcare Bot. We collaborated very closely with the Healthcare Bot team based in Israel, the Microsoft Healthcare Bot team in Israel, and also at that time, the team was also working very closely with the cognitive services team to come up with a COVID-19 FAQ template, which is essentially based out of the FAQ that that's published by the CDC in the US. So we also worked very closely with the Q&A maker team, product team based in India. So we collaborated with all these teams and put together a reference architecture, and then reviewed the architecture with the product teams, got a lot of good feedback, and that's where the whole process started.
I love it. When you have this collaboration and partnership across countries for a common good, this is, what we all should be proud of, not just Microsoft, but all the other organizations that are helping to help with this cause and this pandemic. So maybe it's a good time to show a little bit of like architecture diagram, and then kind of continue the conversation. I know I promised you that this is going to be an informal conversation. So,
sure.
But if you're ready, why don't you go ahead and share your screen, and we kind of diving a little bit into this. And
sure.
My understanding is that this is already published and publicly available, and that's something that Derek and I were going to put the link so people can go and grab it if they don't have access to it already.
Sure. I'll share all that information. Let me quickly share my screen here. So.
And Ganesh, if you could just talk for a second too, back to what Ali was talking about with this idea of collaborating, like you're collaborating with Israel, you're collaborating with India, some very polished, very progressive architectures and technology. Maybe a quick comment about the challenges and learnings about that process.
Sure. So we had to, it goes without saying, we had to actually work across time zones. That was, that kind of posed some challenges, but we were able to get through it, by exchanging emails, and also, the product teams also had to do some adjustments, some changes to the code, so that as this was one of the first deployments of a high availability architecture, they had to do some changes, and they worked on it quickly, and they posted their updates on a GitHub repo. We were able to consume those repos and make changes on our side. So we did run into a few challenges, but we were able to easily overcome it because everyone, there was a sense of urgency, and all of us wanted to basically work on this architecture so that more customers out there could basically leverage this architecture and quickly deploy this solution in production in a highly available, fault-tolerant manner. So that was the whole, the reason behind this. Yeah.
Quick question for you. Do you know how many customers that already like kind of move through this path of making their initial rollout HA compliant?
We don't have a number in terms of how many customers have actually deployed the HA architecture, but we do know that this is based on the data we got from the healthcare bot team. There are currently up to 1,200 instances of the health bot in production right now, and
Wow.
I would assume many of those instances might be might be leveraging this reference architecture out there.
Perfect.
So
all right, let's get into it.
So let me actually pull up the. Are you able to see the architecture?
Yep.
So before we dive into the HA reference architecture, it is kind of important to understand why we need this HA solution in the first place, right? So as we all know, the healthcare bot service, which is right in the center that is a highly available fault-tolerant global service. So it is out of the box. It's a global service, but there are certain components in the end-to-end solution that are basically region specific, that cannot be deployed in a global space. So, for example, the end users of the HealthBot service, they basically use a web chat client to interact with the bot, and this web chat client is also developed by the healthcare bot team, and it's basically a GitHub repo that the customers have to go and fork, and then use the web chat client and integrate that client with their website, with their web application, right? So the web chat client itself, the primary responsibility of the web chat client is to basically bootstrap the user's browser session with the HealthBot service. It basically sends a secret to the HealthBot service. This HealthBot service then basically looks at the secret and then sends back a token, access token. And that is the access token that is basically sent back to the end user's browser session. And from that point on, the end user can then talk to the health bot in the back end. So the web chat client, as you can see in the architecture diagram, is a critical component because this service has to be highly available to authenticate the end user session with the bot service. So when we were working on the HA architecture, we wanted to make sure that this component, the web chat client, had to be deployed in multiple regions. And then we had to front end those app service instances. So the web chat client is essentially a Node.js app that runs in an app service, in an Azure app service. So for a HA architecture, we had to basically deploy the chat client app service in 2 different regions, and then front end those 2 app services with the traffic manager. And the traffic manager basically is a DNS-based load balancer. The Azure Traffic Manager is a DNS-based load balancer. So it receives a request from the end user from the browser, and then routes that request to the network close region. That is the closest region to wherever the user is. So if the user is requesting a session with the healthcare bot from the east, from the US East region or the West region, it will basically intelligently route that request to the network close region for the user. And secondly, it also maintains heartbeat on the existing app service instances. So the traffic manager basically maintains heartbeat information on each one of the app service instances running in the different regions. And if one of the region goes down, it automatically routes the request to the other healthy region. So I'll just take a pause over there and see if there were any questions, and then we can move on to the other components of the solution.
No, I mean, the audience, they're kind of amazed with a number of instances that are already being deployed, and it's being deployed as we speak. So that's a good reaction so far. So one question, in terms of like, maybe we can kind of pinpoint the difference between this HA architecture that you guys worked on versus what you get out of a box if you go ahead and, let's say, use a template to deploy this. what are the additional components that this solution will add to the customers or the organization subscription?
Yeah, so let me actually see if I can bring the other GitHub repo.
Mm-hmm.
Let me know if you guys are able to see
Yep,
the
we can see your browser.
Yep.
Okay. So let me open up the GitHub repo for the HealthBot container sample. So when a customer decides to deploy this solution, the HealthBot solution for COVID-19, they would essentially have to come here to this GitHub repo.
Mm-hmm.
And then there is a deploy to Azure link over here. When they click on this link, it is going to deploy a single region solution for the healthcare bot. So what that means is they would, even before they get to deploying this HealthBot container, which is basically this component over here, the web chat client over here, they would have to go into the Azure portal, provision an instance of the HealthBot service. That is probably the first step.
Yep.
They have to provision a HealthBot service, and then they go to this website, and then they click on this link. And what that would do is, it basically uses an ARM template, an Azure Resource Manager template underneath the covers, and then goes and deploys the web chat client, and then hooks up the client to the HealthBot service.
So
and
the web chat client is a container that is running on Linux, or is it just a web app?
So the initial deployment, you have a lot of flexibility in terms of where you want to deploy the web chat client. It's essentially a Node.js application. So for that matter, you can deploy it on a Windows app service, a Linux app service, or within a Docker container. For that matter, you can even deploy it on Kubernetes as well.
Okay.
So I have an instance over here. This instance of the chatbot is actually running on Kubernetes.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
So it's a COVID-19. So you have a lot of flexibility there in terms of where you want to run this. But when you actually use the deploy to Azure link over here, you are absolutely right. It goes and deploys provisions and app service on Linux instance on Azure, and then deploys the Node.js app on the Linux instance.
Interesting. Okay.
So Ganesh, so what's the difference between someone, and I know we have multiple offerings when it comes to this bot, different bot services. We have this new Dynamics 365 Power Virtual Agents offering, which is more of a SaaS, low code, no code offering. And then you have more of a code heavy version, which is called the Azure Bot Framework, which a lot of our customers are utilizing. And literally you have to be somewhat of a developer because there's some coding required. A lot of that is just free form, very customizable. But now we're talking about this pre-configured, pre-built service that has been developed. What's the difference between a customer starting from scratch and using our Azure Bot Framework, and then these templates that you're talking about that we're developing specifically for COVID-19?
This is a fantastic question, Derek. And so the key difference over here is all that you just described if you were to develop a bot from scratch, you would have to use the bot framework and then basically use the low-level APIs to basically start conversations, ask questions, and all of that logic has to be encapsulated inside of your bot. If you were building a custom healthcare bot, you would have to implement all the logic in one of the supported languages for the bot framework, and then expose that bot over one of the channels, like the web channel or the direct line API channel. There are a whole bunch of channels that are supported by the bot service. So that all requires a lot of work. Now, if you look at the HealthBot service, that basically abstracts all of that underneath the cover. So essentially what you're doing is when you deploy the healthcare bot service, it goes and deploys the bot, and the bot service is also deployed for you. All of that is abstracted from the customer, from the end user. It is deployed in a global namespace, meaning it's the HealthBot service is available globally. It's highly available, fault tolerant, so you don't need to worry about deploying the custom bot in multiple regions and whatnot. It basically abstracts all of that. all that the end user needs to do is go access the healthcare bot service portal and enable the channel that they want to use. The channel meaning, do they want to expose the bot service over a web chat channel? Do they want to expose it over a Teams channel, Slack channel, Facebook, all of that stuff? So, the bot service, healthcare bot service, supports a whole bunch of channels out of the box, and the customer just needs to use the channel that they're most familiar with, that they want to use for their use case.
And I think that's right? The key, that this is, to me, is like a SaaS, and that's why we were successful to roll this out very quickly with all this different organization in the past couple of months, because it really doesn't require a lot of technical expertise. But I think what happens next, and this is where Ganesh and MTC and everybody else can jump in, is when they want to take this to the next level and start adding a little bit customization and kind of expand the capabilities.
Right. Absolutely. So when we were in the middle of deploying this solution for a couple of our customers here, and that's when the healthcare bot team came up with another pre-built out-of-the-box template for COVID-19 FAQ. And this FAQ model was basically based on the FAQs that were published by the CDC in the US. So this gave customers the capability to basically, with a few clicks, deploy the Q&A, the CDC Q&A, as part of their own healthcare bot instance. So in order to use that the Q&A model, customers would have to basically deploy a couple more services. For example, the cognitive service layer. The cognitive service layer, basically underlying the cognitive service layer, you have the Q&A maker. And the Q&A maker is a natural language processing service that basically provides a conversational layer on top of a knowledge base, a custom knowledge base of information. And the custom knowledge base of information in this context would be the Q&A that was published by the CDC. So the Q&A maker, which is part of the cognitive service, can also be deployed as part of the solution by using the template that is posted here on this GitHub repo. I believe we'll be sharing these links with the audience at a later point. Yep. But so this is a Microsoft repo, a health bot reference architecture deploy repo, which has an ARM template that will basically go and deploy the cognitive service, the traffic manager, to split the traffic between two different Q&A maker instances deployed in two different regions. Similarly, it will basically deploy a traffic manager and app services for the web chat client, for the web channel in two different regions. And since the Q&A maker is actually backed by a knowledge base, the knowledge base itself sits in Azure Search. We had to basically also, if we were deploying the Q&A maker in two different regions, we also had to replicate the knowledge base data across those two Azure Search instances. And that's the reason why we have the function, which is a serverless function, defined over here. The primary purpose of the function, the primary goal of the function, is to basically synchronize the Azure Search knowledge base instances across the two regions.
And the synchronization happening in an interval or real time? How does it sync the
so the function? Yeah, so the serverless function supports two different kinds of triggers. One of them is a manual trigger, which is a HTTP trigger. And it also supports a timer-based trigger, which customers can configure to run at periodic intervals during the day or during the week, whenever they want to synchronize the databases. Yeah.
And are these the numbers or the setting that they can do when they deploy this as part of the ARM template, or that's something that they have to go and tweak it afterwards in the portal?
Yeah, so that's a good question. So when after you deploy the ARM template, there are a couple of manual steps which are actually described down below in the same repo. For actually synchronizing the repositories, creating another instance of the Q&A maker, because the ARM template. Let me go back to the diagram here. The ARM template does not deploy.
Now,
Sorry, go ahead.
Can you describe what an ARM template is for folks that aren't following, specifically on Azure?
So the Azure Resource Manager template is basically a JSON-based document that allows customers to automate the provisioning of resources on Azure. So let's say you want to deploy an app service, you want to deploy a traffic manager, you want to deploy storage, any resource on Azure, you can actually create this JSON script, which of course is based on there is a published API, a specification for the JSON, for the format of the JSON document, which is basically the Azure ARM REST API. And customers can basically define that JSON document and include all the resources that they want to provision on Azure as part of that JSON document, and then basically give that JSON document to the Azure deployment manager runtime. And then the runtime would basically introspect that JSON document and provision all the resources for you on Azure. So it's basically an automation for, if you want to deploy a bunch of resources on Azure, you basically can create an ARM template and then automate the provisioning of all those resources using the ARM template.
And another way, if folks are coming from the other side of the spectrum, things like Terraform, or if you used to do things with Ansible, pretty much it's the same functionality infrastructure as a code.
Yes, absolutely. So you mentioned Terraform and Ansible. Terraform and Ansible, both of them have got resource providers for Azure. So whatever can be done in ARM templates can also be done in using those automation tools as well. Yep.
And one thing that you forgot to mention, Ganesh, was that you came from Red Hat. So
yeah.
People should know that as well.
That is true. So I spent about 3 years in Red Hat. I focused on container technology when I was there at Red Hat. Spent about 3 years working on OpenShift, and I pretty much worked on the other side of Windows, on the opposite side of Windows, for my entire life. So my experience so far in Microsoft has been just terrific.
So I have 2 questions for you. Did we interrupt you? You wanted to finish one point, or
no, go ahead.
Okay.
No, go ahead.
2 questions. Understanding that we have a lot of folks that they are more on the business side, or on the non-technical aspect of this solution. They're decision makers, etc. If they want to go and change their deployment from the default template rollout to this HA, I assume that somebody from their IT, from security, they need to be involved, and they need to reach out to their Microsoft account rep, and they engage you or MTCs. Is this something that they can do this by themselves, or you think they probably need some assistance from Microsoft or partners that we have that they are pretty knowledgeable about this solution? And the follow-up question is, since we have this on GitHub, I assume that we're asking folks to use this and send us PRs and make sure that
yes.
They can provide feedback, right? So how is that working, or what's the process for that?
Yes, absolutely. So this is an open source project. Pretty much all we do in the healthcare team, as well as across Microsoft, we do a lot of the code, a lot of the artifacts that we develop is all available publicly on the public domain on GitHub. But going back to your earlier question, yes, it definitely would help for customers. If customers can definitely use the ARM template to provision this reference architecture. But then they can always call upon experts from the MTC and from the healthcare team, the CSU, the national CSU, as well as the healthcare CSU, if they need any assistance or any guidance around deploying this reference architecture. And one other key thing that I wanted to mention here is the ARM template is pretty generic enough in that a lot of the inputs to the ARM template are parameterized. So, every customer's non-functional requirements could be unique. And we kind of, took that into consideration when we were basically developing the ARM template. So a lot of the parameters like Do you want always on enabled for the app service, or do you want do you want to deploy this? There are so many other parameters that are a part of this ARM template that the customers can basically customize the deployment to meet their requirements. And that was a key thing that was a key consideration for us when we were developing the ARM template.
So what's next for you guys in upcoming weeks or months?
Well, right now we are in the process of helping a lot of our customers, healthcare customers, especially in the provider space, implement this solution. But then the healthcare bot service itself, can meet and satisfy a lot of requirements, both in the payer side both on the payer side as well as on the provider side. As an example of an use case on the payer side, it should be fairly easy for our healthcare payer customers to use the HealthBot service to define scenarios for looking up benefits and eligibility for patients, for getting the status for claims and whatnot, because the healthcare bot service also has a very intelligent graphical scenario editor, which can be used by customers to quickly put together scenarios, different kinds of scenarios. And these scenarios could basically derive the data from different kinds of backend data sources. And all those data sources can be seamlessly, easily plugged into the HealthBot service backend. So that's one of the biggest benefits of the HealthBot service. So, there are a lot of, it can definitely meet and satisfy a lot of the use cases out there. So for now, I think, COVID-19 is top of mind for a lot of our provider customers. So we are kind of, pretty, heavily engaged and helping out a lot of customers in this space.
So Ganesh, I had a question, and I know we're a little bit past the top of the hour. Why don't you stop sharing your screen and come back in, bring it in, and we'll do a virtual bear hug and close out the discussion. But I was thinking, so customers are deploying this thing. What are the learnings that you're seeing from a day-to-day? So you have a customer kind of get into this world of the healthcare bot, of cognitive services, which is our pre-built AI stack of technologies that port over to SDKs and APIs that give them the ability to analyze text and things like that. Once they start getting in this world, are you seeing them start to upskill on the platform, upskill in AI services? How are you seeing them mature over time?
Yeah, that's a good question, Derek. So it really depends. Like in the HealthBot itself opens up a whole world of possibilities for our customers, right? So we have customers who have been working with Azure Cognitive Services, especially Louise and Q&A Maker. They can easily plug in those models as backends or data sources for the HealthBot service as well. And the HealthBot service has been designed, in a very generic way, so that to allow customers to basically plug in different kinds of data sources. They can actually connect their systems. For example, payers could connect the HealthBot service to their backend systems. Could be facets, could be their claims processing systems, could be any system, and they can basically consume that data from those systems and then use that as part of the chat conversation, right? So it simplifies a lot of things for a lot of our customers.
And I mean, following to what Ganesh mentioned, I think that the combination of like the Power Virtual Agent and the notion of building custom skills that can be consumed both by the virtual agent and also the typical bot based on the bot framework is going to open up a lot of opportunities that organization can kind of extend the functionality. And what I love is, since everything is open source, is something that everybody can chime in, and it's going to get better and better and better.
Absolutely, yep.
Well, Ganesh, hey, really appreciate you coming on. It was great working with you and prepping this up. And once again, Ali, you're so well connected in the Microsoft organization. You're always bringing some really amazing folks to come on and and just showcase what's going on in technology. So Ganesh, thanks for coming on.
And that's why we love
Sure.
Microsoft.
Thanks. Yeah, I mean, it's great to be here. Thanks for having me, Derek and Ali. It was a pleasure talking to you guys and being on this show.
All right, awesome.
Thank you.
Ali, why don't you close us out?
All right. So thank you all again. Special shout out to Rick Taylor, one of my good friends. He had a couple of comments, and thanks to everybody who joined us. We're going to have another great session next week related to COVID-19 and crisis response. Probably that's something that I would definitely recommend if you're interested to chime in and join us. And if you guys have any feedback, any comment, what can we do to make this better? Please send it to Derek and myself. And if you want to be a guest on this show, by all means,
let's do it.
Door is open for everyone. With that, I wish everybody a healthy and happy Thursday. And until next time that we see you guys live.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you. Thanks, Ali. Thanks, Derek. Thanks, everyone.
Take care.
Yep.